Thank you. You can grab your seats this morning. Here, David, can I give you my car keys? It is so good to be with you this morning, and I thought how special to be with a family this morning, and I really feel that way with the Perkins and the Heberts, and there's nowhere else I really wanted to be on Sunday morning than with you guys, with your church. Plus, I'm your missions pastor, so it just felt right. But really honored to be here. David, love your heart, just the way that you have championed this message and the way that you have created this community and this culture. It's astounding. It's so encouraging. I've been here a number of times since you planted, and I just want to say there's such a tangible increase of the water level of hunger in here. It's tangible. As someone who comes maybe once a year for the last couple of years, it's tangible. There's such an increase in hunger in your community, in your church family. And I just want to honor you for that. It's absolutely incredible. And I see a few sunburned faces out there, so a handful of you were there yesterday enjoying the glory of the sun. And I want to thank you just for the way that you've walked with us, the way that you supported this, the way that you went after it. It really is a family endeavor. And I want to share with you guys, we're going to jump into, a message, of course, but I wanted to give you guys a little bit of just what we're finding out right now. It's just kind of still coming to us in terms of even the fruit of what's happened over the last 5-6 days. And were any of you guys in the big revival tent over the last 5 days? Some of you guys? On the Truman property, we did 5 days of gatherings and worship and prayer, and then sent people out into the streets of Kansas City. And we had about 1,300 who came purely for the mornings, the evenings, and the outreaches. And so every day, those 1,300 were on the streets of your region sharing the gospel. They were in public schools. They were all over the place and doing stuff for teachers, for social workers, for students, door-to-door, homes. And it was remarkable. Every night we would share testimonies. And I was just amazed, astounded by the impact that happened in that. And I thought, really honestly, if it had just been those 5 days, it'd have been worth it for that. The lives that were impacted by the end, we really, went after the individual on this, and there were 504 salvations in the streets of Kansas City, the community, the homes of Kansas City. And many of those were home to home. Many of those were personal. This wasn't a lot of big gatherings. A lot of this was individual sharing the love of Jesus. And those teams went to over 5,100 homes in the Kansas City region. And every one of those getting a Bible, getting prayed for, hearing the gospel. Just astounding. So much, over 3,440 people hearing the gospel. And we were able to give away $1.8 million of goods to needy families across the city in our partnership with CityServe. So it's just remarkable. We've just fallen in love with this city. We thought the Send would be kind of a one-year journey, and of course my love for Kansas City goes beyond the Send. I've been here for many years because of my friendships here, and I will for many more years to come. But we thought the Send journey would be kind of a one-year thing, and of course ended up being a 3-year journey. So we've only fallen more in love with your city. What we thought would be kind of a one-year dating process turned into a long dating process. And we feel engaged now, so that's good. And yesterday, we're just astounded. We're still getting a lot of this, so it's not even complete. But a couple of the things that really struck me yesterday is we made a major call to families to really embrace the journey of foster care and adoption, which is near and dear to my heart. We've adopted 2 kids out of the foster care system. Then we have 4 others, and they're probably still sleeping this morning. But that yesterday, there were a little over 500 families who said yes to that. And I just think of 500 children's lives forever changed. That's their generational lines and patterns forever changing from curses to blessings. Like this is massive. And these aren't just families, these are believing families, right? These are families that love Jesus. And in the states of Kansas and Missouri, there are 3,000 kids in the foster care system that have no hope for reunification. So their only hope is adoption, or they will be fathered and mothered by the state until they age out at 18. And I believe that because of yesterday, hundreds of those kids will have permanent families. And that, I get undone at that thought. And of course, a big bullseye in my heart is the nations. And you know that if you've been around when I've shared in the last couple of years, is it's the 3.2 billion that they're not a number to me. I know their faces. I've been with them. I've hiked into their villages. I've been in their cities, and That's not just a statistic to me. Those are names and faces and people that have never heard the good news of Jesus. They don't even know his name in their language. They've never heard. And yesterday, over 2,500 people responded to the call to the nations to say they would be willing to go anywhere in the world for the sake of the gospel. Do you know that in all of, that's amazing. You can celebrate that. But you know, in Central Asia, which is a massive region of a number of nations, predominantly former Soviet nations, there are only 2,000 missionaries in all of Central Asia, trying to reach millions and millions of people. Well, yesterday, 2,500 people said that they would go anywhere in the world for the sake of the gospel. Guys, we are changing these statistics. These realities were handed to us. They might be the current statistics, but they cannot tell our future. The future is determined by the yes in the heart of the sons and daughters of God. And that yes, that resounding yes yesterday, I believe will change history. And I believe the yes of this community, the yes that's in your heart as we shouted and kind of sang this last song, you know, that we would go anywhere in the earth for the gospel. To me, this is hope. This is Christianity. This is what it means. This is why we were saved. We weren't just saved for our safety, our comfort, our joy. We weren't just saved to join a community that would, you know, be amazing. We were saved to save. We were adopted to adopt. We were brought into his kingdom to bring others into his kingdom. And there's no greater thing we could do than respond to his saving love by being those who are willing to seek and save the lost around us. So I am profoundly encouraged by what God did yesterday. I'm profoundly encouraged by your heart, hearing David's heart, your community. I'm so full of joy. And I want to start this morning with a story, and then we'll land in the scriptures. But I was driving here, just total transparency, going, Lord, what should I share this morning, okay? there was a lot on our minds over the last 5 days, and we had a short donor gathering this morning after a few hours of sleep. And so on the drive here, it was 20 minutes. I had plenty of time, and I knew I'd have worship as well. So I cranked the worship music and just went, God, what do you want me to share on? And I had not thought about this story in a long time, and the Lord brought back to my memory. We share it this morning and then jump into the scriptures. But I was reminded of, this was probably, I'm going to say 7-8 years ago, we sent out a team to India. And it was one of my close friends leading the team who now lives there long-term with his family. And just a team of students, young 18, 19, 20-year-olds. And they were there for a number of months, just obeying Jesus, loving the lost, you know, partnering with churches and ministries in the area. And they had one day that was free, that they didn't have anything planned, but they really wanted to go out and do something. So the team gathered that morning, and they just prayed, waited on God. And they felt like God spoke to them and reminded several of them in the team about a man they had met previously, and that they were to go back to that man and continue to pour into his family. And the reason is that he was severely demonically oppressed. And they were really moved by it and thought, man, let's go back and let's just love on this guy and let's just see what God might do. So they went back. It was in a village, in a slum area. And they went into this home, impoverished family, and the man was there. And the way they described him, because we interviewed this team at length after this story, was that his eyes were closed. He never opened them. His jaw was clenched, so they could barely feed him, and he was dying because of that. He was emaciated. He was skinny. He was unresponsive. He couldn't talk. And his family couldn't put their finger on when or why this had happened. It had been a number of months, though, and that's why he was dying. And he would be in bed most of the day, fitful sleep, and there was no hope for him. There was no medicine. They had tried all of their kind of traditional spiritual practices to try and free this man, and nothing was working. So they went into this home just full of compassion, no real sense of what God might do, but let's just go love him and see what Jesus does. And so they were in there, and they prayed, and they, you know, tried everything they knew to do, just like you or I might do, like just every combination of special prayer powers. And I don't know, I prayed last time, didn't work. Why don't you pray this time? And like, let's just, you know, let's wait on God. What does he want to say? And they felt the Lord said to him in that process that they were to wash his feet and wash his hands. And he was just filthy dirty. He hadn't bathed in so long. So they're just giving like practical, raw, gritty, kind of ugly love. You know what I mean? Just like picture the scene. And so they're loving this guy, and then nothing's changing, but they're just showing him the love of Jesus. And they feel like, man, let's get him out of the house. They don't think the man's left the house in months. And so he can't walk, he won't walk, so they kind of pick him up, one on each side, and they kind of carry him to the house, and they go, let's take him to a tea shop and see if he'll drink some tea. Like, they're just trying to love this guy, right? And they go to this tea shop, and they sit him down, and they order him some tea, and they're literally like trying, the story's funny to me, they're trying to help him drink tea. It's dribbling down his chin, it's on his shirt, like, because his jaw is clenched. And so they're sitting there, and while they're sitting there, and two men come over to them from the tea shop. And they're interested because they're foreigners, and they want to talk to him. They speak a little English, and as they're talking, they realize one of the men has an eye that has cataracts on it. It's clouded, and they ask him, they say, hey, can you see out of that eye? And he goes, no. And they say, well, we're followers of Jesus, and we actually believe that Jesus could heal your eye today. And he's like, okay, pray for me. So they pray for him, and they don't necessarily have a ton of faith because they're trying to help this guy get free, and nothing's working. Do you know what I mean? So this is just them offering their courage as a sacrifice before the Lord. Like, Jesus did it, I don't know, let's give it a try, And so they pray for him, and to their shock as much as anyone, the man's eye completely clears, and he is healed. He can see. And he's so stunned by this, and they're stunned by it. They're like, that worked, unbelievable. Like, they're shocked, they're not like, of course he was healed. This is real life. This is me and you. And so the man disappears though. He's stunned, he's like shocked, he can't believe it. He's looking around, he's with his friend, and they run out the door, and in where they are, it's somewhat dangerous to be caught sharing the gospel. So when he runs out the door, they're like, oh my Lord, are we in trouble? Like, what's this guy gonna go do, And so they're gone, they're still sitting there with the man, they're drinking a little bit of tea. Well, about 10 minutes later, those guys come back with about a dozen of their friends. And they're like, oh my gosh, are we in trouble? And then they soon realize, no, all 12 of those people needed healing. And he had run to tell them that there's some people that pray in the name of Jesus, and there's power in it. And so these people come in, and they're standing in front of it's real awkward. Everyone else at the tea shop, what's going on? And they're just praying for these people, simple prayers. And one by one, they're getting healed. And when they get healed, they're running outside, and they're bringing more people in. Soon the whole tea shop is filled with people, and there's a line outside the tea shop that gets so big that it blocks traffic. So now they're praying for people, they're sharing the gospel, they've got a couple people that are translating for them, and the team is 5, 6, 7, something like that, but there's dozens and dozens of people, so they're splitting up and they're praying for people, and soon the police show up. And they're like, oh no. And these guys are like 19, 20, and it's, they're just picturing like Indian prison, like that's just going through their minds, worst case scenario. And the police aren't mad. The police go, hey, traffic's getting blocked. There's an empty lot right next to here. Can we move all of you over there? Keep going. And so they move over this empty lot, and for the next 6 hours, they pray for over 600 people that just keep coming, hearing the gospel, numerous of them getting healed. And one of my favorite moments in the story is that a guy comes up to one of our guys. I still know this guy. He's so wild. He's 18 years old at the time, and he was so wild. He's just one of those guys that you're like, you're going to change the world. For better or worse, you're going to change the world. And an Indian man comes up to him and says, hey, my wife is in the ICU in the hospital. Will you please come with me? And he's like, absolutely. Jumps on the back of a motorcycle with a total stranger in one of the largest cities in the world and just disappears. And the team leaders are like, unbelievable. They're like, Jimmy is gone. He may never come back again. Jimmy tells the story. He's on his way to the hospital. He's just pumped. He's like, this is the greatest day of my life. And he's on his way. He doesn't know where he's going. The guy's going down alleys and side streets on the back of a little motorcycle. And he doesn't know that at the time, but they're about halfway there, he realizes later. And the motorcycle runs out of gas. And he's like, not today, devil, right? He gets off the motorcycle. The guy's like, I got to get gas. And he's like thinking he's got to go run and find gas and buy it. And Jimmy goes, He lays his hands on the motorcycle. And he prays and he says, God, we're going to the ICU. Fill this thing with gas. Immediately, it starts back up again, and they drive the rest of the way to the hospital. I'm like, what is going on, right? When I hear this later, he gets to the hospital, and he starts praying for people, just him and this Indian buddy, right? Prays for the man's wife. She gets touched by God, and the doctors come in and go, will you please come to my area of the hospital? Will you please come to my area? And they're ushering him into room after room and And person after person is getting healed and literally like in the next couple hours checking out of the hospital. He spends the next number of hours walking from room to room praying for the sick. And the team's like, we don't know where Jimmy went. We may never see him again, right? Number of hours later, he shows back up on the back of the motorcycle, having almost cleared out an intensive care unit at a hospital. And the team is still praying for the sick, still seeing God move in a profound way. Now they finish this finally and the crowd dwindles. They told me for the next week, people found out where they lived and they would come and just knock on their door and ask, would you be willing to pray for me? But at the end of that time, the team looked at each other, they were exhausted, and they, in the back of their minds, they go, oh my gosh, the man's still sitting in the tea shop. So they go in there and they go, there is no way we are ending this day without him getting total freedom. They go back to his home. They place him in his home, back with his family, and they just begin to worship, now filled with a faith that can move mountains, right? There's nothing impossible in their minds now. And as they begin to sing and worship, the man opens his eyes. His jaw relaxes. He looks at them. He eats for the first time in however long it had been, totally set free and delivered by the power of Jesus. When I heard this story, I thought, my gosh, isn't this an incredible picture of the heart of Jesus? And the thing that moved me so much was not even the crowds. It was the one man. It was the one man that had started it all. It was the one man whose home they'd gone into that was so impossible, everybody else would have written him off. And yet he was the key to the masses. And even in the midst of the masses, they didn't get so caught up in the number and the Instagram moment and let's all of a sudden put it out there. Their thought went right back to the man that Jesus loves and wants to set free. And they went and they found him and they would not relent until that man had freedom. Friends, this is the gospel. This is the gospel. And I want to take us to Mark chapter 4 and point this same thing out in the life of Jesus, which he models again and again and again throughout the scriptures. Mark chapter 4, Jesus is teaching, and it says he begins to teach by a lake, but the crowd that gathered around him was so large that he got into a boat and sat in it out in the lake while the people were along the shore at the water's edge. The rest of Mark chapter 4 is him teaching. So he's got this mass of people on the side of the lake. He's sitting in the boat. And he teaches them, you can read the headings there, all these different things. But at the end of that chapter, verse 35, and this is the key, and I think this is so key for where we're at as a nation right now. In verse 35, it says, that day, when evening came, he said to his disciples, let us go over to the other side. This is a profound moment when you really think about it. Jesus has spent all day long teaching. He's exhausted. Spent all day long with crowds. The crowds are exhausting. He's sitting in a boat because they're so big, they're crushing in on him. He teaches, however many hours. And when evening came and he's finally done teaching and pouring out his love to all those around him, this is the moment. This is the hinge, you could say. Is Jesus doesn't go in that moment like, man, it's time to go home, put my feet up, watch some Netflix, and get a good meal. In that hinge moment, it says here that when evening had came, he said to his disciples, let us go. This grit, this determination, this compassion, this love that drove Jesus is the very love and the only love that could possibly turn the tide in America. Safe Christianity will never save America. Comfortable Christianity will never reach the uttermost parts of the earth. There's a reason there are 3.2 billion people that are unreached today. They're hard to reach. We don't reach them in an easy day, clocking in 8 to 5. We don't reach them on just what's comfortable. We don't reach them because it was easy and it was just a part of life and it was part of my job. No. When evening came, Jesus said, let us go. And that grit, that hinge, that determination that life is bigger than my comfort, life is bigger than my little world, life is bigger than my little assignment, life is bigger than me, life is bigger than my desires and pleasures and comforts, and life is bigger than me clocking in and clocking out, and life is bigger than what has become a sort of a American norm, a cultural norm in our nation to kind of just, sometimes do Christianity at different times and other times just kind of check out from that. And, we give our here and go, God, I just gave so much and now I just need to, I just need to rest. And of course, rest is biblical. I'm not, what I'm saying with all this. But this hinge moment, when he's exhausted and he's tired and he looks at his disciples and goes, I need to model something for you because we'll never turn the world upside down if you don't get this in your heart. When evening came, let us go. And his statement here is, let us go to the other side of the lake, leaving the crowd behind. He took his disciples just as he was in the boat. It says there was also other boats with him. A furious squall came up and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. This is one of my favorite parts of the story. Jesus was in the stern, which is the back of the boat, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, Teacher, don't you care if we drown? Now I love this. Like they're in this boat, he's teaching from the boat, and then they think they got to be exhausted. They're like, you just preached a long time, Jesus, like hours and hours and hours. You ever sat through hours and hours and hours of messaging? It's like the last thing you want to do is something else after that, right? You're like, it is dinner time. We blazed right through lunch. Jesus, you are so long-winded, whatever. And Jesus goes, hey, we're not done. We're actually going to cross this lake. Now, these men are fishermen. I grew up working on fishing boats. I'm from Alaska. My whole life, we worked on boats and out in the weather, out in the waves, all of that. And these guys are fishermen. So when Jesus is in the boat, finishes teaching, and he's like, actually, we're going to cross this lake. And then, of course, we learn later that a furious squall comes. Those don't come out of absolute nowhere. Like, those are experienced fishermen looking out going, are you kidding me? Right now? Through the night? And look at the clouds in the distance. Have you lost your mind, Jesus, right? And then they should have been really worried because the scriptures say Jesus didn't even really have a place to lay his head, right? Foxes have burrows and birds have nests, but the Son of Man didn't even have a place to lay his head. So when Jesus brings a cushion, they should have been worried right there. When Jesus brings a cushion into the boat, they should have been like, this is not going to go well. Jesus doesn't normally have any comfort, but he's got a pillow. What's about to happen? He's taking a nap in the back of the boat, and get this, the furious squall hits, and these are experienced fishermen. This isn't like maybe someone who's never really been on a boat and they hit a little bit of waves, and a little bit of wind, and they're like, we're gonna die. Like these are fishermen who are like, we're gonna die. They spent their whole life on this sea, and they think they're going to die. This is a real storm, and Jesus is sleeping on a cushion. So the disciples, if you put yourself in their place, you're like, what is wrong with this guy? He preached all day long. Now he wants to cross a lake in a raging storm through the night, and now it looks like we're all gonna die. They wake him up. He got up, rebuked the wind and the waves, said, quiet, be still. The wind died down and it was completely calm. And he said to his disciples, why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? He's like, what's wrong with you? And this is what I love. They were terrified. They're terrified. He calms the wind and the waves, and they're more scared than when there was wind and waves. They're terrified. They're like, who is this guy? Who is this? Even the winds and the waves obey him. I want to propose to you that the disciples still think Jesus is a little crazy right now. And they're terrified by him, right? Then it goes into chapter 5. And this is the story. It's a weird story, but we're just going to go there. It's the Bible. They went across the lake to the region of Gerasenes. When Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an impure spirit came from the tombs to meet him. Okay, so just put yourself in the shoes of the disciples. You're like, the man gets in our boat to preach. This is our boat, but that's cool. He's a good teacher. Preaches all day long. They're tired, and he's like, hey, we're just getting started. We're going to cross this lake. They're like, you're kidding me. Wind and the waves, they almost die. He calms them. They're more terrified than the winds and the waves. And then where they don't really know where they're going, a graveyard. And their welcoming party at the graveyard is the hardest case in the entire New Testament. It's the hardest situation in the entire New Testament is their welcoming party. It says the man lived in the tombs. No one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain, for he had often been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart and he broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and in the hills, he would cry out and he would cut himself with stones. That's the man who's welcoming them. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell at his knees. I'd have ran and got in the boat at that moment. If you're a disciple, you're like, what is happening right now? Falls at Jesus' knees. In front of him, he shouted at the top of his voice, what do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In God's name, don't torture me. For Jesus had said, come out of this man, you impure spirit. And then you got to love this. Jesus asked him, what's your name? If you're a disciple, you're like, you want to know his name. Should we make tea? Like, what are we doing here, Jesus? You want to know his birthday? Like, what was happening here, right? Hey, buddy, what's your name? I don't know how he said it, I don't know his tone, but what is your name? And then the answer's even worse. My name is Legion, for we are many. We? His name is we are many. This is the worst answer you could imagine hearing. This is Jesus, what's your name? Small army of demons is my name, right? And the disciples, again, they've got to be going, this man has lost his mind. What is happening? Now, it gets crazier. A large herd of pigs, they're feeding the nearby hillside. The demons beg Jesus, send us them out among the pigs, allow us to go into them. He gave them permission. The impure spirits came out and went into the pigs, and the herd of about 2,000 in number rushed down the steep bank into the lake, and they were drowned. This man has so much bondage, so much going on inside of him that 2,000 pigs run into a sea and drown. Those tending the pigs ran off, reported this in the town, the countryside. The people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by a legion of demons sitting there dressed and in his right mind. And ironically, they were afraid. Those who had seen it told the people what had happened to the demon-possessed man and told about the pigs as well. Then the people began to plead with Jesus to leave the region. This is astounding. This man is in an impossible situation. He's in a moment, and they have tried everything. They've tried every way to set him free, and then they've tried to just chain him up then. If they can't free him, let's just chain him. They've literally doomed him to live in the graveyard. They tried to keep him there, and he would break the chains, and in one conversation with Jesus, he's set free. One conversation. There is no heart too hard. There is no place too difficult. There's no such thing as a closed nation. There's no such thing as a place too resistant for the gospel. The gospel doesn't know how to not transform a life. The gospel doesn't know how to not bring transformation. If it's the gospel, it transforms. And in one conversation, this man is set free. The people of the town come out to see this, and they're afraid. And you ask yourself the question, why? Well, their pigs are all dead in the sea. And the man that they couldn't even chain is sitting there in his right mind, clothed. And they're like, we have never seen power like this. And they beg Jesus, please leave. Now, in our day, in modern times, I mean, this is like you set up a tent. This is revival. This is like you build the website, you plant the church, like you have just had revival. This man is free. The whole town's going to hear. They're a little afraid now, but man, when they hear the truth, they're all going to respond. And this is what's so profound to me. As Jesus was getting into the boat, he's going to leave. The man who had been demonically possessed begged to go with him. Jesus did not let him. But he said, go home to your own people. Tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you. So the man went away and began to tell in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and all the people were amazed. And then the last verse, 21, when Jesus had again crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake, a large crowd gathered around him. He crossed a lake in a raging storm in the middle of the night after pouring his life out all day long for one person. How many know Jesus was the greatest strategist to ever live? He was the most brilliant mind that ever walked the earth. He defines strategy. How many know Jesus was the most efficient in a kingdom definition of any person in human history? Not our definition, but kingdom definition. And can you imagine, he has 3.5 years to change all of human history. 3.5 years. If I told you right now, starting today, you have 3.5 years to change the course of human history, how many of you know every day the measure of intentionality you would walk in? Jesus knows he has 3.5 years to start something, a revolution that would sweep the entire planet. Every day was intentional. Every moment was calculated. And Jesus decides with the Father, because he only did what he saw the Father doing, that crossing a lake in a raging storm in the middle of the night for one heart was the most effective use of one day of those 3.5 years that he could possibly do. And that when he goes there, he doesn't experience the revival. He doesn't experience the awakening. He doesn't have the whole town turn to him. He has one man turn to him, and the rest of the town's so afraid that they say, get out of here. We don't even want you here. He goes, that's fine. I did what I came for. I did what I came for. Gets back in the boat, lands on the other side, and what's there? A crowd. Friends, this kind of compassion, when it hits the church, when this kind of extravagant love destroys every barrier of comfort, when this kind of extravagant love destroys every ounce of passivity, when this kind of love brings a faith, an apostolic faith into our hearts, where, like I said yesterday, we get filled with the same ambition that Paul talks about in Romans chapter 15. It has been my ambition to preach Christ where he has not been known. And that ambition, when it hits the church, and I just want to say, Radiant, this ambition is for you. I believe this is an apostolic community. And what I mean by that, apostolic, according to the scriptures, are those that are concerned with the places where Christ has not yet been preached. Apostolic is multiplying, growing, pioneering. Apostolic is looking where we are not just where we are. Apostolic is transformational for the city. Apostolic isn't content to just gather everyone in the building. Apostolic wants everyone in the building to carry the glory of God outside of the building, right? Apostolic is not the ministry to the saints. This is not just so you can get ministry. Apostolic is the ministry of the saints. Apostolic is you going into your workplace, you going into your schools, you going into your neighborhoods with this profound courage, this profound compassion. And the beauty of this is, and what I love about this story, full circle all the way back to the man in the tea shop, is this is for everyone. This isn't for microphone people and people with websites and lots of Instagram followers or a title or a position or on staff at a church. This is for everyone. This is for 18-year-olds. And man, look out. This is for 15-year-olds, and a lot of those 15-year-olds know it. So look out. Right? Look out. This Gen Z, wave of zeal that's in this generation. My gosh, Dawson Perkins and my son Asher, they're frightening to me. These guys scare me. I'm like, what they're going to accomplish in their life is going to be far beyond what I could have imagined, right? This is for everyone. This is for the 70-year-old. Yesterday, it was so special for me is that my dad flew from Nepal to be at the gathering because he lives in the Himalayas, because he's giving his life to the unreached and taking his field of biology and getting his PhD so that his last years, he told me before he went, he goes, Andy, I'll easily be traveling and mobile till I'm 90. He goes, I'll get my PhD, it'll take me 3 or 4 years. He goes, I'll only be 77. He was serious. He goes, I'll only be 77. He goes, the last 13 years of my life might be the most fruitful. He goes, I'll never regret it. So he's right now at Kathmandu University. What? Getting a PhD in aquaponics so that he can help people create sustainable food source and micro-enterprise so that he could change more lives in the last 13 years of his life than the first 77 years of his life. This is for everyone. This is for everyone. No one in here, you cannot count yourself out from this. You cannot count yourself out from this. It's the only way we will turn the tide in this nation and in the nations of the earth, is when every believer is able to rise into the courage to go, you know what? I am filled with the power of the Spirit of God. I am filled with the same thing that was in the life of Jesus. I'm filled with the same thing as the guy next to me. We can walk this out together, and every voice is important. Every voice is needed. Every life is so important to what God is doing in the Great Commission across the earth right now. And I know and believe that this is an inheritance for Radiant Church. This is something God is wanting to put in your heart because you are called to bring transformation to this city. You are called to bring transformation to your neighborhoods. And it's not rocket science. It's finding the one. It's the man at the tea shop. It's the man in the tombs. It's the ones that everyone else has written off. It's the coworker that seems too hard. It's the classmate that seems impossible. It's the teacher that there's just no way. It's the family member that seems too prodigal. Friends, they're the key to the breakthrough. And today, I think he wants to release that grit, that fortitude, that endurance like Jesus. That day, when evening came, he said to his disciples, "Let us go." And I think that go is part of the very inheritance of this church community. I want to ask you to stand. In a moment, I'm going to hand this back to David, but I want to pray before we do that. I was thinking this morning also on the drive about this stop for the one, this heart for the one, which to me is the true apostolic. And maybe we don't use that term a lot anymore, but it's a biblical term, and it's not what we've made it out to be today. Today, it's like a card that someone carries, apostle so-and-so. No. That's missing what it really is. For Paul, it was miles and miles on foot so that those in Turkey, Asia Minor, could hear the good news of Jesus. It's an unrelenting passion to go until all have heard. David Platt said this to me a couple months ago into our community. He said, it must become utterly intolerable to us that there are 3.2 billion people still waiting for the gospel. I think God wants to touch us with that intolerable today. And I just want to say every one of you has a role to play in this. Every one of you. Whether it's long-term in the nations, whether it's your own neighborhood, whether it's getting behind those who are called to the nations, whether it's short-term, whether it's long-term, everyone has a part to play. Friends, 2,200 languages around the world today still waiting for their first verse in their heart language from the scriptures. Together we can do this. Together we can do this. And I was thinking about my wife. Years ago, she met a woman who was a Buddhist in our town in Kona. She had a daughter who was 16 and was having her second child already because of the pain and the brokenness of their family. And my wife just went, this is my family, I'm adopting him. She just began to pour her life into those kids, pour her life into that 16, 17-year-old, pour her life into that mom who was a practicing Buddhist, and she spent years just loving them. And it was sort of like, man, is this gonna go anywhere? And it wasn't long before in that 2-3 year process, I should say it was a while, that mom all of a sudden realized that this love that my wife had been showing her for 2-3 years was the only truth and the real love. And she radically gave her life to Jesus. Radically. Today, she is so hungry for God. We're still pouring into this family, and her daughter and her grandchildren, and all of them have experienced the love of Jesus in profound ways. And again, it wasn't rocket science. It's my wife who has 6 children of her own going, you know what? It's evening. Let's go. We got 6 kids. I played taxi all day long. Let us go over to the person that is yet to experience the love of Jesus. I don't know, we could just kick back and let's just watch some shows. We're exhausted right now. Let us go over. And it doesn't mean we don't rest. It doesn't mean we're going to burn out. And really, burnout's more than anything, it's a lack of intimacy. It's not necessarily working hard. Let us go over. Holy Spirit, I want to pray that over this incredible church this morning. Let us go over. Let us go over to the most difficult neighborhoods. Let us go over. I pray for every young adult, every Gen Zer in here, every high schooler, every university student, Lord, and let them go over to the highways, the byways. God, even this morning, would you grip more with the nations? The water level of the nations is only growing here, and it's only going to increase, guys. You are going to send hundreds to the nations in your future, hundreds. You're going to be known as a mission-sending church, but you're also going to be known as a local transformation church. You're going to be known for both. This is a local and global community. And I know it's still unfolding. It's still being realized, but you're global. You are absolutely going to see local impact and global. So Lord, I pray it right now. Let us go over. Father, grip this community for Central Asia, for South Africa, for North Africa, for the Himalayas, Lord, for South America. God, grip this community. Cambodia, India, God, Sri Lanka. Father, I pray the Philippines. Lord, Indonesia, the largest Muslim nation in the world. Grip some for Indonesia today, the Arab Gulf, God. I'm asking, release that apostolic passion, ambition, that Christ would be known where he is not yet known. Release it in here today, God. Release it in here today. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, God.